Good afternoon, good day, everyone. Welcome to yet another webinar series from Westford University College. Today, we are glad to invite you all for the Masterclass on Blue Ocean Shift, which is supposed to be the version 2 or Blue Ocean Strategy 2.0. And we hope you'll all enjoy this. This is basically unlike the previous webinar series or masterclass some of you would have attended. This is a two-part series, and the first one is today on the 6th of June. We would be introducing going back to the basics, and you'll get to know what is the basics ABCs, which helps all of you out there to navigate through the rough seas. Today we have a very special speaker, an expert on blue ocean strategy, who's been in the business for the last decade as an expert on blue ocean strategy. He's been interacting with participants, strategists from over 25 countries in the North Africa, Middle East, Asia, Asia-Pacific, and Africa region. He's Mr. Raj Kumar, whom you can see on your screen now. He'll be speaking to you all very soon. He's the CEO. He's currently the CEO of UCSI Consulting Group based in Malaysia. We at Westford, we have been fortunate to be partnering with them. We are a collaborative partner of the Blue Ocean Regional Center in Malaysia, which is part of the UCSI Consulting Group. We have been collaborating with them for the last 6 years, taking up consulting projects and conducting workshops in association with UCSI Consulting Group in this region. And we're very happy to introduce you to Raj and also gain from his experience. In fact, they have been involved in setting up businesses. The consulting group has been focusing on strategy, innovation, and leadership in setting up businesses, in helping businesses to come out of rough seas. And as you all know, or you would know more during the session on how or what magic Blue Ocean strategy brings into business. It's very important in the current scenario because many businesses, some of them thinking about shutting down, some of them recovering from the phase that we have seen in the last couple of months due to the deadly virus that has been impacting the business worldwide. But I'm sure this session will bring more light into how to overcome this, not just overcome and survive, but how to thrive on such situations, and how Blue Ocean strategy plays a very good role to help all of us learn lessons from it. So it's very important to remind all of you that this is not a one-part series; it's a two-part series. So it is very important to attend the next one as well, which is scheduled on the 13th of June, and surely Raj will enlighten you on the significance of attending it and how you get there. Please note that we will take the questions after Mr. Raj speaks for half an hour, and I'm sure we are looking forward to a lot of questions. We have participants who are in different domains of expertise. Some of them in the middle level senior management, senior executive management positions, some of them consultants themselves, some of them entrepreneurs, some of them working in leading multinational companies. And we also have our students, a full-time MBA and undergrad students, some of them taking up live projects on business consulting, and some of them working in very senior management positions. So we'll take a lot of questions, and Raj was very particular about spending more time on the Q&A rather than he talk about the lessons of Blue Ocean strategy. So please note, we have an ongoing public chat section that you see on the screen, but when we get onto the Q&A session after half an hour, you need to post your questions there, and I, Zawahir, representing Westford University College, will be moderating the Q&A session, and we'll take your questions there. We'll take as many questions as we can in the following 30 minutes or so. And I hope you all enjoy the session. I hope you all take back the best lessons from this session. And I'm sure, as Raj would agree with me, that this will really help not only your business, but your perspective on how to overcome this not so everlasting challenge in the market scenario. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me take this honor on behalf of Westford University College on to invite Mr. Raj for this session. Welcome, Raj, and over to you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Zawahir. And I want to thank Westford for this great opportunity here. And really want to welcome every one of you to this session, what I call ABCs to Navigating Rough Sea. So it's pretty much going to be a session where, we are going to look at it from a blue ocean shift perspective. And I'm going to share a little bit from my experience in terms of how I've been helping companies to navigate in different seasons, and I hope to do justice here, and especially on a Saturday. It's 4 p.m. here from in KL, and so I bring you greetings from Kuala Lumpur, where I'm based. And what I want to do is to go through a number of slides, but at the same time, during this session, I really hope that you will have what I like to call aha moments, one or two aha moments that will spark innovation for your business. So it's really a pleasure to be here. And as mentioned by Zawahir, I'm going to share at least for about 20, 25 minutes, 30 minutes, and then we're going to go into Q&A because that's where we can solidify a lot of the learning. So I want to just get to know you a little bit in terms of the crowd that I'm speaking to. So I'm going to do a very quick poll here. I want to know if you are an entrepreneur or an employee, right? So, and that's going to be the first poll that I want to run. And second poll that I would like to run, just give me an indication of what size, what's the size of your company? Okay, so I just want to know. So we have, what I can see is that we have about majority 70% are employees. We have about 5 to 10% entrepreneurs, full-time students, about 16%. Size of your company, most of you are, 45% are more than 200 people. So you are in big companies, and also there's about 40% that are less than 70. Okay, so interesting. So I always say that in this current situation, every employee have to think like an entrepreneur. So in that sense, Blue Ocean is going to give you that, going to empower you with that kind of entrepreneurial skills in order for us to navigate in rough seas. So I believe a lot of these principles I'm going to share today are going to be very helpful to you, even though if you're an employee, but at the same time, you are going to be, really acting as an intrapreneur, for your company, and that's what's required right now. So the approach, I know many of you have been attending a lot of webinars, and I think one of the key approach to this webinar and how I want to make it a little bit more blue ocean is I'm going to share a lot of principles, key principles that will change and shape the way we think. We need new thinking in this season. And so we have to have that mindset shift. So even though if you're a student, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're an employee, you have to have that blue ocean shift in your mindset first. And that will give us purpose and courage to change so that, we are bold enough to know how to change. And lastly, I want to make it as practical as possible, where I'm going to teach you some tools or one or two tools in this two-part webinar so that there is a clear action plan on what you need to do in moving forward. So really, that's the approach that we're going to take for this two-part webinar series. And so I call it ABCs because they are acronyms for A, standing for agility to pivot your business. B, we're going to talk about business model. And C, we're going to talk about cash flow, because all these are very important. Even though if you're an employee, you have to understand all of this, because at the end of the day, your bosses are thinking about this. So if the more you know about this, the more you think about this, the more you can create value for your company. And of course, you're going to get promoted if you create value in these times. And we'll take Q&A. We'll take some questions at the end of the sharing. So for today, I want to share a little bit about how to be agile, how you can look at your core strengths and create value for new customers, or what we call non-customers. and how you can also create value across the supply chain. How can you capitalize across the supply chain, turning your rivals into revenue. And also, at the end of the day, I want to teach you a blue ocean tool, which is called non-customers, right? The 3 tiers of non-customers. So we'll touch on these three main topics today, and I'll give you some examples on these three topics, and then after that we can go into the Q&A session. All right. Okay. So being agile is very important, especially leveraging off your core strengths. Asking yourself, what are some of the resources, processes, abilities that you have, keeping stock of your internal strength and pivoting the business during this point of time in order to be agile. And having that kind of agility is very important. So let me start a very simple example that I observed during this COVID season, which I thought was brilliant. Here we have an example of the distillery owners in US and Canada that are converting their production lines of basically making alcohol into manufacturing what we call sanitizers, right? And because there's a lack of sanitizers, and everybody knows that the main component of sanitizers is actually alcohol. And so what they are doing right now, they are leveraging off their core strength of manufacturing alcohol and pivoting the business, being agile enough to start creating sanitizers to promote and to give to their existing current customers. Now, we know that they are supplying to like restaurants and F&Bs, which are also badly hit. So they are not going to buy alcohol from them. But how do you pivot? How do you sit down and sit back and how can you change and pivot your business to a point where you leverage off your core strength to the point where you can create new value for new customers? And that's exactly what these guys did. And so I think this is a very good example, a simple example, just to start things off on how agility to pivot the business, leveraging of your core strengths, takes you to another level and creates new customers. So speaking of non-customers, this is a great time where I want to introduce you to a new tool, a tool that is in Blue Ocean Shift. It's called the 3 tiers of non-customers. So we have basically 4 bubbles there, right? So the first one is the existing user. So typically companies and business owners tend to focus on the existing user. These are your loyal customers, right? Now we have the second bubble, which is what we call the soon-to-be non-customers. They are soon to become your non-customers because mentally they have become non-customers, and because of some pain points, because of current situation, they have just waiting to jump ship. So in the case of the distillery company here, we can see that the bars and restaurants have become a tier 1 soon to become non-customers, right? Because of the current situation, they can't serve customers, and they are now, their business is badly affected. But what these distillery owners are doing by creating sanitizers, and they can still retain, the idea here is to retain your soon-to-be non-customers. So they are still retaining their bars and restaurants, keeping them as their customers, maybe not selling to them alcohol, but selling sanitizers to them. That's how you keep it. And once the bars and restaurants open, what will happen is you still have them as your customers. You can still sell alcohol to them, but at the same time, you can also still sell sanitizers to them. So what has happened is you have increased your revenue stream, you have retained your non-customers, so to speak, your soon-to-be non-customers, and you have created value by leveraging off your core strength. Now, this is a very important principle that you got to take note of, because this is how the first step of pivoting your business. Now, the second tier of Blue Ocean strategy in terms of non-customers is what we call refusing non-customers. Now, refusing non-customers are those that are saying no to you, and there is a barrier. So in this case, the medical industry might hesitate to buy sanitizers from this company. But with a proper strategy to unlock and unblock these barriers, maybe you can capture this group of non-customers. And so this is exactly what they did. So they get all the necessary certification approval. Now they can supply to the medical industry. And last but not least, the last bubble is the unexplored non-customers. Now, the unexplored non-customers are those that you have never considered in your industry. This is where you start to explore the true blue oceans, furthest away from your existing users. This is where you start to explore customers that you never thought possible. And because you have pivoted your product or your service you are now able to capture a whole universe of non-customers, in this case, like retailers, local communities, state governments, and so on. So by doing this, by leveraging off your core strength, by looking at non-customers, by pivoting your products and services, you are now making the blue ocean shift to capture new non-customers, at the same time retaining your current customers. Now that's a very powerful principle. So if you do a systematic analysis of your business, you'll be able to see that you can look beyond your existing demand. You can pivot your business. You can create fantastic new business opportunity by systematically unlocking non-customers and pivoting your business by leveraging off your current your current strengths, your core strengths. So let me give you more examples, right? Now, back in Malaysia, where I'm based right now, if you can't pivot your product, there are many companies that are pivoting the experience, and I love these two examples. So you might not be familiar with the brands, but Daily Muscle is actually a gym, and because of the current COVID situation, they can't open the gym. But what they have done is they have created an entire completely different online experience with people working out at home. But this difference is they've created the fun element, and they created a community experience which never existed in the gym. And what happens here is that, by doing this, by pivoting the experience, they are capturing non-customers, people who occasionally go to gyms, tier one, people who refuse to exercise, going to gym, tier two, because now they can do it in the comfort of their home. Unexplored, people have never think about having to go to the gym, and they're embarrassed, and so on and so forth. So this is a fantastic example of how you can still continue on the business by leveraging off your core strength, but looking at technology, changing and pivoting the experience. And they're very successful. In fact, they have gotten more customers right now, more people subscribing than they ever did before. The other one is bubble tea, tea leaf, and they have created this DIY package, where you can create your own tea leaf at home, and apart from just relying on retail, now they can actually create their own bubble tea at home. And by doing so, they are moving away the focus of their retail. They still keep the product, but they're pivoting the experience. So they send this DIY kit to your house, and you create it, and thus capturing new non-customers, thus capturing new fan base. And even when things get better and they open again after post-COVID, they will still have new fans, new non-customers that they have captured. Going back to that principle of looking at your core strengths, analyzing non-customers, pivoting the business, pivoting the product, or pivoting the experience. That's the principle, and that I hope is giving you one or two aha moments, even as I share in these examples. So next, I want to talk a little bit about at the end of the day, there are many companies that have pivoted throughout the years, and I'd like to talk about this international example, and I call it repurposing the brick. So companies have pivoted for decades, and those companies that do that are the ones that are agile, irregardless of size, and have constantly reached non-customers. They might not be pivoting their products per se, but they might be pivoting their experience. But yes, to some extent, they are repurposing their product. In this case, repurposing the Lego brick. So I love Lego as a company, and I think they're just brilliant. And many people might not know that they actually started off in 1916. And in 1929, 1934, actually, their company changed its name to Lego. And in 1955, they actually came up with the Lego brick, which is patented and even very famous up to today. But what's more important is, they have pivoted the business by going to theme parks, movies, partnering with movie production houses, brands, and so on. And they've captured a whole lot of non-customers, which I'll show you shortly, the non-customer analysis. But what I like about this company is that they are constantly looking at new customers and non-customers, buyers, groups as well. And I think what's interesting is also in 2018, they've even came up with their own sustainable brick, which is made out of granulate extract from sugarcane. So they are not just manufacturing plastic Lego, but now they are going to more sustainable products as well. So if we were to look at their non-customer analysis, which is very interesting. So every toy company looks at existing users, which are the kids. And what they have gone beyond existing demand is, apart from the kids, is when we look at the kids growing up, they become soon to be non-customers, right? They become gender neutral, they become teenagers, adults, and so on. And so what happens is this is where you want to retain them. So how can you create something where it doesn't look childish, but it looks, it makes them still cool, right? It makes them still want to so-called play with Lego or build Lego and make it and turn it into a hobby instead of playing with toys. So that's very interesting, the way they position it and the way they market it. So they have captured their even adults who are still building with Lego, not playing with Lego, but building with Lego. But we all know that we're all playing inside. So what about refusing non-customers? People who like to go to movies, sports enthusiasts, video gamers, and so on. Now they have also start pivoting their entire experience and started capturing this refusing non-customers by partnering with movie production houses and by also capturing some of these video gamers as well. And it's about strategically looking at this group of people and communicating with them and start capturing them as well. What about the unexplored non-customers? We have the education industries, you have the collectors, artists, and so on. And Lego now is also being used in the education industry as collectors. People buy and sell and make a lot of money. And there's also artists like Nathan Savaya who have done tremendously well developing Lego sculptures. So repurposing the brick and to capture non-customers. And this is a sign, or rather it's a very key principle of why some companies are built to last, and how some companies keep creating and keep developing the blue ocean. So if you look at this particular company, they are constantly innovating and they are constantly capturing new non-customers. Okay, now, well, when we look at the 3 tiers of non-customers, where we have tier 1, soon to be refusing, and the 3rd tier, unexplored, I also want to bring a new element, right, of discussion here, where when we talk about unexplored non-customers, we also want to consider across your supply chain. So many people are stuck within their supply chain. Well, firstly, there are companies who don't even understand their full supply chain. And there are companies that are stuck in a particular area in the supply chain, and thus making it difficult for them to explore non-customers. But I want to challenge this, and I want to encourage you to think beyond your supply chain, explore the unexplored, which is looking at your supply chain and asking, how can you leverage and look across your supply chain. So, well, to answer that, I want to go back to basics again. Many people don't understand what a supply chain is, and so this is really a one-on-one supply chain, right? On supply chain. So how do you pivot within your supply chain, turning your rivals as revenue? So if you look at a coffee business, right? For those of you who might not be familiar with the supply chain, so if you look at a coffee business, you would know that from the coffee farm, you need to wash it, and you need to process it, and then you got to roast it, and then it goes to the bar, and then it's consumed. So if we were to label this from 1 to 7, we can split the supply chain into what we call streams, because supply chain is explained based on a stream that's coming from the top of the mountain right up to the river. So we have the upstream, midstream, and downstream. So in the case of the coffee business here, the upstream would be number 1 and 2, the midstream would be 4 and 5, and downstream, which is direct to customer, would be 6 and 7. And so Starbucks actually started off as midstream. And so Starbucks actually was more on roasting, and then they moved down to downstream, and they created a brand. And thanks to Howard Schultz, they created a brand, and they expanded further, and they are now a household brand. So the point here is, when you're exploring non-customers, especially unexplored, you want to look at your supply chain, analyze your supply chain first and foremost, map it out, and start to ask yourself, can I move upstream? Can I move downstream? Can I move midstream? how can you capture new non-customers by, again, leveraging off your core strengths, but exploring further. So a simple example would be, let's say if you're a caterer, right? A caterer will be a downstream, right? You're giving food services, products, basically to, or rather you're providing food for your customers. Now, what if a caterer goes into midstream? So what happens here is they will start to produce products like chopped ingredients, and you start to produce, or rather supply these products to other caterers. That's when you move up midstream. But what happens if a caterer goes further upstream is when they start to produce, or rather have a farm, like an egg farm, right? So you go into farming and you start producing to the midstream and downstream and so on and so forth. So analyze your stream and think about how you can create value, and how can you make your rivals into partners. So I've been doing a lot of this. This is very powerful principles, because we've been using this a lot in our consulting, and we've got some companies who are very, very strong in downstream, going up to midstream, supplying to other competitors, working along the lines of creating value. And instead of competing, you start collaborating. So that's the fundamental understanding of blue ocean strategy, where you don't compete with your rivals, but you create value. You actually create your own market space. And here, in the current situation, you don't want to compete, especially now. You want to maybe even make rivals as revenues. You want to start developing and creating values. But how do you know what's your value that you can create? Again, going back to your core strengths. That's a principle here. Okay. So being agile is about not just pivoting a product, pivoting a business, but also pivoting across the supply chain. And that's very important when in the current situation, you must be flexible enough. There was this company that we were just collaborating with, where they had a retail coffee place, but maybe an idea. What I noticed actually is that they started going up midstream, and they started producing a ground coffee, and started giving up, or rather selling to other coffee retailers. So that's a fantastic example of turning your rivals into revenue. Okay, so that's pretty much in terms of upstream, downstream, midstream. So one more example before we go into the Q&A is Amazon. So Amazon is a very interesting example. So Amazon started off as a midstream bookstore, and they later on went upstream by providing e-commerce cloud services. Later went downstream after that by providing retail stores, creating Amazon Go and so on and so forth. So if you look at the way Amazon started, and the way it went upstream and it went downstream, that's how they create a fantastic company and created value. So this is the kind of thinking that you need to think about when you inject, when you have blue ocean thinking. You need to inject some of these elements and explore, especially your unexplored non-customers. So it can be applied for any business. It can be a big, small business. So if you're an employee, I want you to think along these lines and go and talk to your boss and think about how you can create a blue ocean shift for your company. Come up with some ideas using these principles of looking at your core strengths, looking at non-customer analysis, looking at ways to pivot the business, pivot the experience, pivot the product, and moving forward. Okay, so reflect. One important thing that you need to think about is, again, just to reflect back on what we were talking, is ask yourself, what are the core strengths of your organization? Take a piece of paper and write down. If you're a business leader, if you are heading the department, you can do it at the department level as well. Write down what's the key resources, assets, capabilities, skills that deliver new value. And this is the time when you want to ask yourself, who are your new non-customers? Who can you approach? Leveraging of this, how can you pivot the business? How can you pivot a new product? How can you pivot a new experience? How can you capitalize on the supply chain? These are some of the things, the principles that gives you the thinking, rather, that helps you to think and have that blue ocean shift in your mindset. Okay, So what I want to do right now is I have another two more poll question, just to interact with you a little bit before we go into the Q&A. I'm asking you, what is stopping your business from innovating or pivoting, right? And also, at the end of the day, do you see a silver lining in this crisis? So let's see your answers right now. Okay, so you can see from the answer, what is stopping your business from pivoting is essentially cash. We have lack of leadership and vision. And we have, that's number one, low motivation level. No, it keeps changing. Okay, let's wait now a little bit and let's see what happens. Okay, so I think lack of leadership and vision is still number one. Number two is low motivation, fear, or low motivation level of fear. Number three is cash flow and don't know how. So this will change if you are an entrepreneur. Will definitely change because always cash flow is number one. But when you're an employee, you're looking for leadership. Makes sense. And leadership at the end of the day extends to a level of motivation and fear. But the good news is almost 65% agrees that there's a silver lining in this crisis because it's proven through time history. But what's important here is that there needs to be very strong leadership that gives vision and motivation and removes fear during this time of crisis. So if you have a good leader that gives you strong leadership and vision and helps the company to pivot, great. But if you don't, what you have learned today, go back and share with your boss. You can manage up. You can say, hey, boss, here are my ideas on how we can create a new product. We can create a new experience. We can create a new revenue stream. We can leverage off our core strength. We can analyze and capture new non-customers. Here's how we can move across supply chain. This is what we can do. Go to your boss with some ideas and, and be an entrepreneur. And I'm sure when you create value, employees that are the most valuable to the companies are those that solve problems. And when you create value to your company and you go with an idea and a solution, I'm sure your boss will appreciate that even this point of time. Because some leaders out there are still wondering, what am I going to do and how am I going to do it? So there's a lot of pressure on the leader in this season. So I encourage you that you see the silver lining, fantastic. But I think you need the tools and you are now empowered today to take this, whatever you have learned, go and present it to your employer. And if you're an entrepreneur, well, this is definitely something you got to sit down with your team and start to plan and come up with some ideas. Sketch this out, start to list who are your non-customers, start to map out your supply chain, start to identify your core strengths, capabilities, processes, what you can use, to create new product, new experience, new service, and so on and so forth, right? And if you're a student, well, start thinking on how you can either be a fantastic employee or entrepreneur or think about business, who knows, right? So that's basically it. Okay, so I think we've talked a little bit about the poll results and Q&A, and I think now is a good time. As I mentioned, I always love to have these sessions to have more Q&A because I would probably be sharing as I mentioned, the principles, the tools and frameworks, but I want to internalize it further. I want to address some Q&As and solidify it further by understanding more from the ground. Instead of it being a monologue, it becomes a dialogue. So I'm going to call Zawahir right now back to moderate this session, and we're going to go into Q&A.
Hello, everyone. So please post your questions
Yep.
on the Q&A section that you see next to your chat box on the top, and we'll take your questions. I'll also read the questions for you, Raj, to make sure we don't miss any. And good to hear about the A of ABC today, and a kind reminder for those who may not have joined in the beginning of the masterclass. So we are having a two-part series. The next one will be on the 13th of June, same day, same time, and that is when we'll talk about the B and C. So how to be agile, and I'm sure you'll have a lot of questions, irrespective of whether you're an employee, entrepreneur, a student. It doesn't matter. We are all going through the same scenario, and you'll have questions, and Raj will be more than happy to answer your questions. So let me take the first one, Raj, as I see you here. So this is from Ankur. Sir, you have mentioned that we need not compete with our competitors, but how does that work? Uh, but to create value and collaborate, could you please elaborate more on that? Like, it's a very
Yeah,
radical statement when you say ignore your competitors. Yeah. So
yeah.
that's
So
Ankur.
I think in blue ocean thinking, the spirit is to not focus entirely in the red ocean space of competition. Sometimes companies are so obsessed in competing that they forget, or they rather, or they forget the most important people in the equation, which is the customers. So they forget to create value, or they have lost track of what's really happening on the ground, just because they are so obsessed in the competition. So when you're obsessed in beating the competition, what you're doing is you're losing sight of what's happening on the ground, and you are actually focused on beating a competition instead of creating opportunities. Instead of, the market is still huge out there. So for example, like what this COVID has taught us is, if you're still thinking about competing, what if your competitor just dies off? So what's next? So do you think, can you assume that you're going to be able to uh, win the market? And you see, in blue ocean thinking, everybody is fighting for the same piece of the pie. But here we are talking about creating new market space, creating new opportunities, and completely changing the rule of the game. So it's not that your competition would not be there per se, but what we are saying here is, don't be obsessed with your competitors. You should be obsessed with what the customers want, and you should be obsessed with what the market is market opportunities are. You should be obsessed with how you can create value in the industry, and how you can change the industry even. That's more important. You should be obsessed with the customer and non-customers, not your competitors.
Thank you, Raj. We have a question from Alishba Nadeem. What are your thoughts on shifting to lean management in an automobile manufacturing company, especially during the current pandemic?
Oh yeah, I
Shift
mean,
thoughts on shifting to lean management
of
and
course, of
specific
course.
industries, automobile. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. I mean, this lean Six Sigma has always been used in a lot of manufacturing, even before COVID. So I think what's important right now is, you might reduce your costs as much as you can in terms of the current pandemic. But what I would recommend is to think demand. How are you going to sell more cars? How are you going to create more cars? How are you going to create cars of the future? For example, there are some companies that are already looking at, like in Malaysia, like Proton, they are looking at ways where they can sanitize. The car is sanitized itself in a way where it creates a safe environment when people are coming in and out. So, that those are the things that you need to think about when what people want, right? So if there's only so much you can do in terms of cost optimization, which is great. I'm not against it, but I'm always thinking about value innovation, increasing value and reducing cost. So I think lean management is fantastic, but I'm more interested in innovation, like how are we creating value for the customer, how are we using maybe AI, how are we using different approaches to to embrace the future.
Thank you. The next question is by Yasir Abdul Manin. Is there a kind of checklist of sequence of questions that I would be asking in order to know the non-customers?
Yes, there is. In fact, I'm not just to give you a glimpse of what a process look like when we talk about consulting. Of course, today I what I did is just a very an overview, right? A quick overview. And this process of understanding non-customers would definitely take a longer process. For example, what I'm showing right now is, if you can see the slide, you can see the slide, right? So what I'm showing right now, Zawahir, is the process of creating blue ocean in consulting is there's a lot of sessions that we do. So we will definitely go and identify non-customers. We interview them. We ask them, what they want, and we do a full analysis. We look at a tool called a buyer experience cycle. What are the pain points of the customer? What are the pain points of the non-customers? And so a framework, there's a completely robust framework that takes about 6 months to 1 year. In fact, sometimes for people to really understand customers, non-customers. And there is a very robust process of going deep in terms of thinking, insights, and at the end of the day, asking ourselves what to eliminate, reduce, raise, and create. So there is a process, there is a systematic analysis, and at the end of the day, we want to land on these questions on what can we eliminate, stop doing, do less, grow, and innovate, right? So there is a robust process, and there is a checklist which I think, if I were to talk about that alone, it will be more than half a day just to talk about that. So
Yeah,
I think the answer to that will be yeah. But in principle, you, at the end of the day, the questions that you should be asking is, why are they the non-customers? That's the most important thing, right? Why
yeah.
are they turning to? Why are they non-customers? What is their pain points? That is the first important question.
Thank you. We have a question from Maria. Hello, Mr. Raj. It was a pleasure attending your webinar. I work full time. However, I'm currently undergoing my bachelor's for a current module. I'm acting as a consultant and proposing a method for an organization based in Sri Lanka to increase their visibility within the market. My question is, how do you analyze the market and identify the best course of action to recommend a solution or a method or a process? Uh, should I repeat?
Yeah, which industry per se?
Uh, Digital agency.
Okay. So I think what you need to do is you need to follow a process. So Blue Ocean strategy, there's a process. We talk about understanding where you are, imagining where you could be, and creating ways to get there. So you could extract that process from the book, or as a consulting firm, we have mastered the process. We walk clients through from as is to be. So you can get in touch with us, and we will be more than happy to collaborate and walk you through a process of creating a blue ocean for them. So it's a set of series of tools that we use. It's a real consulting process, and yeah, I think that's the short answer to that. Because at the end of the day, the principle is you have to understand, imagine, and create. So these are three things that you need to know. Understand where you are, imagine where you could be, and create. That means create strategies on how to get there, which is completely out of the box, completely different, completely blue ocean, completely I've never done before. But at the same time, not increasing costs, increasing value while reducing costs. So that's a framework that we use, and I'm showing a bit of that framework. Now we can do it completely virtual, and we're doing it anywhere in the world. We are doing like in 3 countries right now. And so get in touch with us for a strategic dialogue. I think we can take that offline.
Thank you. I think I can answer the next question, Raj. Please, could you highlight the ABC points again? I could just get the A. I think the B and C
Okay,
comes
yeah.
next week.
Yes, PNC is next week. That's why we
Do you
divide
want
it
to
into
add
2
anything
parts.
there? So, Abbas, if you're
Yeah,
there, the B and C comes next week. It's only A that was talked about today.
yeah, because
Ashish
A, I
Arora.
think,
Yeah.
yeah, because A is about agility and B is about the business model. I'll talk about the business model canvas next week, and a bit on cash flow. So if you have friends who are entrepreneurs, who want to start a business, or currently are entrepreneurs, you should get them to join next week's session. It's going to be quite interesting on that.
Sure. Thank you. So, Abbas, business model and the cash
Cash
flow
flow.
part comes in the next week. Yes. Thank you, Raj. Ashish Arora, the question from him is Blue Ocean strategy being conceptualized in 2004. How was it transformed over time to become more relevant to present times? Is it still relevant in 2020? And how has it managed to remain relevant? Is the question.
Well, it's completely relevant even more today than ever before, because you're right, the book was published in 2005 and is based off 100-year research. They came up with principles and so on. And in 2009, we started a consulting practice. And even up to today, I think the Blue Ocean Shift book was published in 2018. And that compiles all the companies that have used the tools and methodologies and have became successful and creating and their blue ocean like Citizen M, and they've used the process and methodology, and so it's proven, it's well researched, it's proven, is proven in practice as what we have been doing. If it's not relevant, we will not be still in business. And we've been more busier today than we ever been. And I think it's even more relevant today because now at the present time is where people need to think blue ocean and create their blue ocean, create uncontested market opportunities. If you tell me now it's not relevant for any business to create opportunities, to make money, to reduce costs, then I don't know whether that business should ever be in business in the first place. But if there is a need for a market creation, to move away from competition, to create new opportunities, to think in a different way, like what I've introduced today, then definitely Blue Ocean is even more. A lot of people want to do that, but they don't know how. And the good news is Blue Ocean creates a systematic methodology to do that using the tools and frameworks that helps you in your thinking.
Thank you. Raj, there's an overflow of questions, so I think we need to manage all of them now. The next question, I can't see the name though, but how should the organization access when it is the right time to diversity crisis, or when the organization is fundamentally healthy? How do you assess that? Is the question.
I would say that, that's why I gave Lego as an example. They're always innovating. They're always, even though when they're healthy, great companies innovate, especially when they're healthy. Don't wait until their company is in trouble and then you have cash flow issues, because you get into a whirlwind of problems, and that's very, very difficult to come out of. So always, a lot of people think that you got to strategize when your company is not doing well. No, you got to strategize even more when your company is doing well, because that's when you get on top, you stay on top. And that's why when we work with organizations, it doesn't mean that they're in trouble. They could be doing very well, but they always want to innovate. They always want to create opportunities and create their own market space, because a blue ocean will eventually become red, right? People always come and try to take a piece of your pie, but that's where you always have to innovate and create your what we call strategic moves at any in the market.
Thank you. Raj, I'm parallelly looking at our this session is being streamed on Facebook as well. So there are
Sure.
there are many who are attending on, they're following the Facebook live stream and not on the webinar portal here. Taking a couple of questions from there as well. We have Vijay Doriarajan asking, what is a good strategy to obtain funding for new startups with a blue ocean strategy? That's Vijay on our Facebook live stream. Yeah.
Well, I think at the end, when you're looking at funding, you always need to show your funders what problem are you solving, right? And how are you creating value? What industry problem are you solving? And so when you explain to your customers or to your investors using the methodology of Blue Ocean strategy, and when you talk about just showing your to-be canvas, your strategy canvas, investors will definitely get it. And we have done work for like banks when they want to invest in some business. They ask them for the strategy canvas, and when you look at the strategy canvas, you can already see whether this business is a Me Too business or it's a blue ocean business, is breaking away from competition, is solving the pain point of industry, is solving the pain point of the customer, and that's most important. So tools are very visual. But for a startup, you have to think blue ocean. You have to think, how are you creating demand? Are you really solving a pain point, or is it just a cool idea? Do you have the right ABCs in place? Are you creating value? Are you going to be profitable? That's what we're going to talk about next week. But today, are you really creating value? Value proposition, very important. That's my advice for startups. I work with some startups, and I mean, in the past, and through some incubators, and through some government agencies, and this is what we do. We take them through this whole tools of blue ocean strategy. They start to see things that they never thought they would see as a founder. They always think that, oh, I have a great idea, I want to push it to the market. But when they go through the whole process, they realize, okay, we can make it better, or you know what, this is just supply and not a demand-based idea.
Thank you. Raj, do you have like another 2 hours? It's a
Yeah,
lot of
sure.
questions.
It's a Saturday.
The next one from Omlud. What advice would you give to an automobile company to navigate the challenges faced due to COVID-19 using Blue Ocean strategy? It's very similar to the earlier question on the same industry was on lean management, but this is in general how to navigate through the current challenges for an automobile
Yeah,
company. Yeah.
yeah. Well, like I said, I think the automobile companies are definitely going to be badly hit, but it's a temporary situation. I think people will eventually need to think about, upgrading their cars or buying new cars and so on. But there are so many ways, as I mentioned, injecting innovation, removing the fear factor of people, and creating value base in terms of pricing, in terms of different ways of purchasing the vehicle. There are many ways, even like over here, there are companies that are exploring leasing, instead of buying. There are companies that are offering a different experience in terms of the end-to-end experience, the selling of not coming to the showroom, but creating value by letting you use the car. Uh, and there are also many ideas, innovation ideas of the product itself, which means it has to be addressing the current pain points of the industry, which is not just getting from point A to point B, but to be safe at the same time, to be clean, to have a hygiene factor there, and also to be fuel efficient. So like Toyota, for example, why they became so successful in penetrating to America in the early years was because of their fuel efficiency, and because of the economic situation that was during the crisis and during recessions and so on. And so you got to move with times. You got to understand how you're going to create value and what are the existing pain points of the customer. So if you are an automobile manufacturer, you got to think really, to pivot the experience. So you can pivot the product, you can pivot the experience, but you can also pivot the business model. It doesn't have to be a purchase, it can be a lease, it can be so many different ways, that you have to think in a deeper way, and talk to customers, non-customers. And I think different countries will have different challenges. Like Malaysia, there is a current move. Yesterday, the Prime Minister announced that those that are buying cars have a lower tax. They have, the car prices are dropping, better financing. So these are things that needs to be considered.
Thank you. I'm sure the next question you'll enjoy, Raj, and I'm sure you're thriving in this current scenario, the consulting firms. The question from Elisha Javed: what is the biggest change that happened in the consulting business due to COVID-19 or during the current pandemic?
Well, the biggest change I think is travel. Travel. I've never been grounded this long in one country. I think what's beautiful about this is we have technologies like Big Marker, Zoom, that can create an environment that we can consult anyone, anytime, anywhere. And I think that's something that is good. It doesn't have to be just physically, being present physically, but at the same time, we can also add value by giving a very cost uh, uh, conscious kind of approach where you can reduce the price because we don't have to travel anymore, and it's a win-win. And like I said, we are doing a project now in China. We've done something in India, and I think it's exciting times. Of course, if you ask me, I wouldn't want to stare at the screen for the whole day. But as things get better, we would work around it. I think it's about being agile. Yeah.
Thank you. Raj, for your information, there are some questions coming from the same person, multiple questions, and they're really good questions. But what I'm doing is prioritizing, give the first timers an opportunity before
Sure.
I go back, if time permits, to the same person asking multiple questions. Yeah. So Ahmed Alashkar's question is: can we have an example of an organization providing with services? So I would assume it is an example of a service-based organization applying blue ocean strategy. And that's my interpretation of the question, but I can't be sure. Can we have an example of an organization providing with services? Is the question.
Yeah, sure. I mean, service. It'd be good. Service industry is also very wide, right? So it'd be good if you can be more specific. But I would say, if you were to consider F&B, right? F&B in the food service industry, a lot of F&Bs have pivoted their entire eating experience, and they've gone into catering, for example. And we have find ways to capture new non-customers, create a different experience, create a safe environment of eating. And some of them, again, going back to some of the examples I gave just now, they are now moving away from just dining experience, but we are going into catering business. So and hotels are now pivoting towards going into healthcare industry, right? We in our own group, we are also looking into ways where people with in Malaysia, sorry, there are companies that are pivoting their entire service experience to create a value that removes the fear factor from customers, right? So I think service is huge. So if you could tell me exactly, in service, what particular, we have tons of examples, but I want to just give you the right example for service. Yeah. So same principle applies. Yeah.
Thank you.
So
Thank
I
you,
will
Raj.
ask the questioner to give me industry. Then I can give you examples, because I have tons of examples in my head. So I want to just give you something that obviously this person is asking something that is maybe important to them.
Sure. Thank you very much, Mr. Raj. That's the next question for an informative session on Blue Ocean Shift.
Yep.
In a banking industry that is already facing a downshift in the current pandemic, how far can Blue Ocean strategy help a financial institution, especially when you advise that obsession should be focused away from competition, because in banking, every product is designed keeping competition in mind?
Well, if I'm being honest, I thought that the banks are the ones that are making money during this time. They're always making money. So, like in Malaysia, the banks just came out with their reports, and all of them are making quite good profits. So I'm not sure if the banks are hit at this point of time. But yeah, maybe I would say that a lot of their profits are reduced. I wouldn't say that they're in crisis mode as compared to like the travel industry, for example, right? And I think for banks per se, what they need to do is, you see, banks are very traditionally inherent, and banks needs to pivot their entire experience for the customer, have to be more digitalized. And I think the disruption that will happen, innovation that will happen in the banking sector is the digital banks, where there will be a lot of these microfinancing banks. There'll be all of these bite-sized banks that will grow very, very fast. So I would say what a bank can do right now Again, go and talk to your non-customers, go and look at their pain points, create new products, new values, new services that it will help them in this current situation. And I think that's very, very important, because um, at this stage, we are now needing a lot of cash flow, and so banks should think about how they can increase their customer base by relooking at their risk instruments, because a lot of them are very traditional risk instruments, and there's a huge growth in SME sector, and the banks that can capture the SME sector as a non-customer are the ones that will win.
Thank you. Let me remind the participants, the audience. I can still see a lot of questions on the public chat. I'm sorry, I'm not ignoring your questions, but I'm looking at the questions in the Q&A session. So if you can post it there, and when time permits, I'll revisit the public chat section. Raj, we have a question from Ismail Ibrahim. Thanks for the session so far. How do you really identify our core strengths as an organization? And he has a specific industry to mention. I would love an example using a local company in the oil and gas service business. So I would assume local companies in this region, Raj, the oil and gas local company in the Middle East region. Yeah.
So I mean, we have done for oil and gas, but we have not done anything in Middle East. We have done for like companies like Shell and so on, but and also companies that are in the supply chain of oil and gas. So I think if you talk about companies that are providing uh, specific equipments, right? I think to identify your core strengths will be to do a checklist, to do an inventory. So it can be a strength in terms of process, it can be a strength in terms of the product you develop, or in terms of your manufacturing capabilities, or your anything that you are good at. When you list it down, you can do it in terms of hardware and software. Hardware meaning in terms of processors, in terms of assets, in terms of resources, what do you have? In terms of software is the people. What are the list of skill sets that your people have that can be utilized in order for you to create something new in the market today? And that's exactly what are things that we're doing with one company. And we are now in the process of looking at them to look at their products and services and look at other industries. What industry can they provide? So maybe now they are providing to oil and gas, but maybe they can look at transportation. Maybe they can look at power. They can look at different non-customers, and then they can start pivoting the product and like making some changes and tweaks to the products so that it can supply the needs of the other industries at a better price. So there are many companies that are producing, equipments, products that can be repurposed for other industries. So that's thinking behind.
Thank you. I think the next one is a yes or no question. Hassan Khan, is Blue Ocean strategy only intended for startup businesses?
No way, no way. Blue Ocean is for everything. Anybody who wants to make money is there. I don't think I feel we shouldn't look at startups and big companies, small companies. A company is a company, whether you're small, big, or and so on. I think a lot of people are hooked up on startups, and I think startups great, but I think I feel that we need to change from the return on coolness to return on investment. So if you want to create a nice, great company, it has to be solid. It has to create fantastic value, profit, and people proposition. Because I think what I noticed recently, a lot of people are creating a lot of cool ideas and very cool, but they are not profitable. And I think at the end of the day, they're just relying on investor money, and that's not what Blue Ocean is all about. Blue Ocean is about creating value, profit, and people. So the answer is yes to all. I don't like to put companies in a box like, oh, this is a startup, this is a scale up, this is a big company, this is only a that only applies to this. No, any business is supposed to solve a problem. Any business is supposed to make money. Any business is supposed to hire people, whatever the size. And now when you're small and nimble, you can create more value. You can actually grow very fast. if you have the right fundamentals, if you have the right ABCs in place.
But Raj, I have a question. See, we have seen your how successful your consulting group has been, the UCSI consulting group, and you have been consulting with groups, multinational companies, multi-billion-dollar conglomerates. So, which was the biggest and the smallest company in terms of size of employees or turnover in the
Or
last 10 years?
the biggest has been 10,000 employees. The smallest has been 10 employees, and
Okay, so
and
that
it and it applies to all. The principle is the same.
across
Whether,
industries. Yeah.
and sometimes a small company is faster to pivot than compared to a
Mhm.
big company. That's why companies
Yeah.
like Amazon and all that, they want to be the biggest startup, but they still want to create that startup culture, innovation culture. Yeah.
Thank you. We have a question from Mikhail. How can we understand the supply chain and what activities are upstream all the way to downstream? Okay. Uh,
What I mean,
all the way to downstream.
what's the question again?
Yeah. Okay. How can
It's
we
a very,
understand the supply chain? What activities are upstream all the way to downstream? So I think it's a supply chain question,
yeah.
and I'm not
I
able to
think that
link
was
this here.
yeah. I think it's a fundamentally. I've explained earlier how to look at a upstream, downstream, and midstream. So at the end of the day, the upstream is I gave the coffee example. Like when your upstream is like when is the source of it, and your downstream is when you're more closer to your customer. So you have to analyze what's the top up and what's downstream activities. Depends on different industries.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that's a very generic question. Munir Mullah, the next question. Ideas are sometimes not given enough thought by the top management uh, when they're shared. How one should share an idea? I think it's an entrepreneurial question. How one should share an idea? Those could be accepted and supported wholeheartedly by the top management. Would statistical analysis of
I think
qualitative analysis to support blue ocean idea help in more acceptance? How do you get your ideas to the top management? So is there it's a
yeah. I think when you go to your when you go to your top management, I think the most important thing for you is to present a good case study. I mean, a good use case, right? You have to go with a substantial, well thought through, deep thinking uh, case, right? You have to present your case in a way where to show the demand, to show the business potential. And if you go and say, these are the pain points, this is the value that we're going to create, this is the money we're going to make, projection, and these are the people that we need and resources that we need, and how we're going to do it, I think it's almost impossible for anyone to not agree with you. It's a more of co-creation. It's very important to get a buy-in when you create a team and come together and come up with a great idea. But more importantly, it should not be just supply side. Oh, I have a great idea, I have a cool idea, but it has to be demand. What problem are you solving? What pain points are you solving? Those are most important things that you got to look at, and use the tools. Use the tools to visualize the strategy, and that will definitely help.
Sure. Thank you. Anthony, next question is from Anthony. The current pandemic has almost changed everything in the business world. I'm sure we all agree with that. There seems to be a complete paradigm shift. My question is, with the current restrictions, health-related guidelines and rules, etc., how do you utilize technology and this framework to bridge the gap between where we were and post-COVID era? I'm sure everybody wants to hear about this.
Oh yeah, I mean, like I think the industry that is the most agile to change and recreate the processes to remove the fear factor will be the winner. Say for example, like airline, right? So how can we leverage on technology for airline? Well, it must be paperless, it must be seamless, it must be touchless. So to the point where I will have all my information on my phone already, and I just have to scan all the way in, and I don't have to have that much touch interaction with people. Maybe I can collect my meals already before I board the plane, and maybe I can go on the plane and I can have my bags with me and not with, so it's about rethinking and reimagining the business to make sure that we remove the pain point, or rather remove the fear point for during this COVID season. And when you do that, the industry that does that the fastest, and the industries that are willing to change the fastest, will be the winner. I'm sure people will travel again if we leverage on technology, if we leverage on a pain-free or fear-free experience. Then I'm sure people want to go get on the plane again. But can they guarantee that? But how can they do that? Technology. Like here in Malaysia, everywhere we go, don't have to fill up our names. We just have to put in a QR code, and we know exactly where this person has been, throughout the day. And so I don't want to have touch anything else, right? So when you think about the flying experience, now there's so much of paperwork. There's a boarding pass, there's scans, there's too many security checkpoints, there's a lot of opportunities for infection and so on. So this is definitely going to change the way we travel, go through security checks. The entire configuration of a plane might change. The seating arrangement might change, but it's not impossible. So the fastest to change will be the biggest winner.
I'm sure the younger people traveling today wouldn't believe if we said our air ticket was a book in the 80s. A 10 pager.
Exactly, exactly,
I can't
exactly,
imagine that.
exactly. Now
Uh,
you're revealing our age.
Mercy Matthew, next question. Is Blue Ocean shift utilized in all industries and sectors, or is it just relevant in industries and sectors that deals in sales? I would say, yeah, all industries. I'm sorry, Raj, I'm answering that question, but
Sure,
there's an
sure.
extended question. For instance, how do a HR consultancy that deals in strategically HR projects incorporate this in their business?
Very
HR
good idea.
consultants.
Very good point. So, HR consultants are always talking about people, right? People issues and so on and so forth. So, I think one of the main things about the biggest change that's happening right now is resources, right? People. Do I need that many people? How am I organizing my people? How are my people creating value? These are all the important questions that you have to think about if you're a HR consultant, because companies are already looking at different ways of working from home, pay different kind of payment instead of paying full salary, looking at deliverables, weekly deliverables. So there are a lot of changes, trends that are going to happen, and the way we work, the way we hire people are going to change. The way we fire people are going to change. Work experiences are going to change. So it's going to definitely be very interesting in the next couple of months. But I think as a HR consultant, what you need to think about is how can you help companies navigate, especially from a people point of view, in terms of the operating models that are changing right now, the operating models and how people are being organized, how offices are being organized, and how in the future remunerations are being reorganized and realigned. I think that's very important. And that's from a very uh, business operations point of view. But from a change management point of view, a lot of companies need HR consultants to help them with the change agenda, because a lot of companies are reimagining the business, realigning, changing the restructuring, changing people's roles. So I think HR consultants need to think about change management, risk, culture change. There's going to be a new culture moving forward, how people are going to work, how people are going to be reorganized. Those are very important things. So creating new culture, in a new norm, that's very different. Because if you're an employee and you're operating still in the old ways and you don't want to change, you're going to make yourself irrelevant. Yeah. Okay. Shall we take
Okay,
the last
Raj,
question?
I know we are uh, there are many more. maybe we have to take three or four questions more. I don't know if time permits, but
Uh,
let us make it faster.
yeah, maybe we have
Yeah,
another 5 minutes. Yeah.
yeah, another 5 minutes maybe. Yeah, we have a question from Arijit. Uh, in the security sector, homeland security projects are critical and unavoidable. As you can understand, that's all about country security. But due to the pandemic, available human resources on site or off site or in the offices reduced to 30% or less. Hence, milestones can negatively be affected. How do we deal with this situation in Blue Ocean strategy? With Blue Ocean strategy is the question. So, home security with the cut down in resources.
So I think cut down resources. We got to look at whether it's
So
the time.
he's added on a point, Raj. Sorry to interrupt. Uh, Adding to the question, we are moving slowly towards remote working era. So what is going to happen to uh, that scenario when
Yes,
we are?
I would say companies are starting to realize, as I speak to many leaders, that they don't really need an office per se. So I think remote working, thanks to technology, thanks to tools that can be used, that are for project management. So people are starting to work remotely. So I would say not 100% remotely. I would say maybe close to 60 to 70% remotely. There will still be some physical need, but it will be more of a hybrid model. So that's my take on that.
Okay,
And and
thank you.
and tech and technologies. People are accelerating this whole concept. Like in the past, we have to have everybody in the office, but today they can be working from anywhere. They can be working from at home or Starbucks, and that doesn't affect the deliverables of the day. you know and I think that as bandwidth increases, as 5G comes in play, virtual realities, augmented realities, innovation, a lot of it is going to change the way work is going to be looked at.
Thank you. We have a question from Nail Alasmar. Hi, Raj. How to solve the conflict between sales looking for the expansion of the business, new customers, and the finance department? So, conflict between sales and finance department. Worried about the risk. I'm working at pharmaceutical company. So that's Neil's question.
What risk of finance and
The conflict between sales and the finance department, looking for expansion for new customers. So in a pharmaceutical company, how do you cope with it? Is there a conflict? And if there is a conflict, how do you cope with it? Within between the finance
well,
department and the sales department, yeah.
finance department are always happy when you bring in money and you sell more. They always create. I mean, they are not happy when we don't have sales. And when we don't have sales, the salespeople tend to blame the finance. Say we don't have this, we don't have that. We didn't have in a budget. So I think the lifelong conflict between sales and finance will always be there. It's a healthy conflict, but I think more importantly for the salesperson is don't worry about your finance team per se. You got to think creatively with whatever resources that you have. How can you create a different experience? How can you sell without increasing costs? How can you sell differently? How can you create a new value proposition? How can you pivot in a very different way? And finance will need to be a bit more flexible even now because of the current situation, and they have to have speed in making sure that we pivot and the business as fast as we can. So the more flexible the finance team is without compromising on their integrity, and the more the sales team work with finance in creating new product, processes, services, then you've got a winning formula. I think a lot of times there's a lack of understanding between the sales and finance team. And so if they can come together, we can solve the problem. And now is a great time to do this because of the crisis. Because in the past, when times are good, they say, no, I'm going to follow my way, you do your way, and so on. But now, because of the crisis, people are more open to change. People are more open to collaborate. People are more faster to change. People are more are just more flexible, because the situation calls us to be flexible. So the level of flexibility now is great. So if you want to initiate any kind of change, now is a great time to do so.
Thank you. Raj, to
Okay.
take the last couple of questions, I'm going back to the public chat
Last
section. Last one?
last one, yeah. And
Yes.
we'll save more for next week. We'll save more for next week, because we
See,
want to take
there's
some
been
questions next week as well.
a lot of questions people in the public chat they have posted there. They
Sure.
didn't come to the Q&A.
Sure.
So Damilare has a question. How is the first and second stream applicable to the telecommunication sector?
The what? Sorry.
The first stream and second stream applicable to the telecommunication sector.
Well, I think it's the same. Telco, you have your downstream where you're providing a service to your customer, and you have your midstream where you're providing services to other telco providers, and you have your upstream where you are the technology and infrastructure provider. So it's about whether you want to become that upstream infrastructure developer, provider, backbone, provider, or you want to be a midstream where you create products and solutions to other telco providers, instead of you trying to fight with other telco providers and trying to capture the same group of people, right? Now is the time maybe to collaborate. Now is the time, maybe if you have, based on your core strength, develop something that provides exceptional service, exceptional experience. Maybe you can provide it to other telco providers, and they might be more than happy to pay you something if they are creating value in turn for their customers, right? So I think at the end of the day, you got to think, and I think you have to map out from the basic infrastructure to the midstream, like a distributor, to the downstream, which is direct retail, direct to customers.
Thank you, Raj. There are about 50 plus questions that we haven't taken, but unfortunately we are running out of time. I'll take a last one because Ziad has posted it multiple times, the same question. I think we should take his question in both sections.
Sure.
Ziad Ghosh, his question is, I have utilized the COVID-19 effect that shifts the current status quo and paradigm into an online business dynamic, whatever. I'm developing a mental health solution. This topic will be less of a taboo and more of a trend in our market. What do you think about it? Mental health solution. In the current scenario, I think it's very important as well. So what do you think about this?
I think it's a important idea, because now there's a lot of mental state issues that are being faced by people today because of COVID. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of mental anxiety because of job loss, because of the current economy, because of racism. There's so many things that are happening right now, and people are in a very unstable and negative mental state. So yeah, I think this is a great opportunity to provide some positive energy. You can check out Geo, I think Geo, or under Deepak Chopra, they created a nice app that helps people to meditate, relax, and so on. And they are creating spirituality and technology together. So there's a lot of good examples out there, a lot of apps that are fantastic out there that can help people. I think it's a good idea. But the question is how to monetize it and how to create people to make sure that they're always there with you. And you've got to be sustainable, because it's a fantastic idea, great service, but it got to be sustainable. So your revenue model is something you need to think about. Maybe you should come for the next session.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Okay.
Raj. We have exceeded by 20 odd minutes. Thank you so
Yes.
much. It's very enlightening. And thank you, everyone, for all those questions. And apologies to those questions which we couldn't take. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. There were a lot of questions asked by the same people multiple times. Good questions, but sorry, we can't take any more because we are running out of time. Thank you very much for all those who attended this session. Please do not miss the next one, which is scheduled on same day, same time on the 13th of June. Thank you, Raj. Looking forward to the next one. I hope you
Thank you,
enjoyed the
Zawahir.
interaction.
Yeah,
thank you so much. Yeah,
definitely. Thank you to everyone, and all the best, and stay safe. Thank you. Bye.
stay safe, stay blessed, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.